So here's the thing. It's convention season. Soon people all across this great nation of ours will come together in convention halls to say, hey, I like that thing. I actually went to my very first convention just a few weeks ago. Look at all of these pictures of me with fellow nerds, and this guy who's dressed like Metal Sonic, which is based as hell. It was a lot of fun. But not every convention can go smoothly. See, conventions are deceptively simple. Take away the pomp and circumstance of things like Comic-Con and too many games, and what you're left with is just a bunch of tables for people to hawk their wares, a couple of semi-famous people to take pictures with, and a couple of events for people to show off their cosplays. How hard could it be? Well, remember, we humans are a bunch of dumb assholes, so even the simplest idea on paper can be very easy to screw up. Everyone's heard of things like Rainforest and DashCon, everyone knows what happened in the ball pit, but there's so many other stories that are just as, if not more crazy than those, and I feel like they deserve some attention, and that's what we're gonna do today. So, enjoy, I guess. I never figure out how to fucking transition from the intro to the We're going really far back in time for our first story. The original Star Trek aired from 1966 to 1969. Nice. And while it received high praise critically, it didn't have high viewership, and so it was canceled. 3 times. Yeah, the show got canceled after every single season and only got brought back twice because of a large fan outcry. You see, while not a lot of people watched the show, those who did fell in love with it, and continued to watch it even after it was canceled, with it actually growing in viewership after cancellation instead of shrinking. This was the first time that this ever happened in the history of television, by the way. It's kind of a big fucking deal. These obsessive Star Trek fans, dubbed Trekkies, started hosting conventions as early as 1972 with Star Trek Live, which was a massive success, which inspired other Trekkies to go on and make their own conventions. These were usually small and mostly just fans coming together to share their love and show off some early cosplay, and if they were lucky, maybe they'd get one actor or writer to take some time out of their day to come on down and say a couple things. It was all very slapdash and cheap, but what mattered wasn't the money that was or wasn't spent. What mattered was the people that were there and the memories that were made. And this bitch had to ruin it. Lisa Boynton, as I'm going with, a tax consultant, was sitting around one day and realized, wait a minute, this can get us a lot of money! And so began to work on something huge. Something that would blow everything else out of the water. Something that would revolutionize fan conventions. Something that would cost a lot of money. How much money? $100,000. In 1975. That would be $607,000 today. Over $500,000, holy shit. But that money was worth it because they were going all out. A full replica of the Enterprise Bridge, famous sci-fi writers like Harlan Ellison and Robert Bloch, and most impressively, the entire Star Trek cast. William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, DeForest Kelley, James Doohan, Nichelle Nichols, George Takei, and Walter Koenig, the entire main cast of the original Star Trek series. I cannot stress how insane it was for the time to get that many people. They even got a few other actors that were only in a couple of episodes just for good measure. They were truly going all out. But there was a problem. This all came at a premium. A whopping $20 whole for the entry fee. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but adjusted for inflation, that comes to $124.86. For context, a ticket to San Diego Comic-Con, the largest and most popular convention in the world, is $85. Now granted, those $85 would only get you one day at San Diego Comic-Con, while the $20 here gets you for the entire 3-day experience, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But San Diego Comic-Con is held in a large convention hall and has basically every single franchise you could possibly imagine represented. This was a small room in a hallway at a Hilton in Chicago that only had Star Trek. Hell, obviously it was the 70s, they only had the fucking original show, they didn't even have Next Gen. So it's obvious what happened next. No one came and the con was a complete failure. Wrong, bitch! 16,000 people showed up. Again, to a small ballroom and hallway at a Hilton in Chicago. Uh-oh. So now, we've got a completely different problem. This place was way too overcrowded. I couldn't find a lot of footage or pictures from the event. Obviously, it was the 70s. People didn't have phones back then. But shout out to the YouTube channel Hey How, as they have a whole slideshow of pictures they took from volunteering at the convention. And what do you know, this place looks packed. I actually found a 3D recreation of the very ballroom that this was taking place in, though obviously it had been renovated over the years, which gave me a good sense of the scale here, and also just how poorly organized this whole thing was. Remember that giant recreation of the Enterprise Bridge? Well, that took up a lot of space. They also needed a lot of space for people to stand in front of the bridge, since that was the main draw of the con. Add in a few tables dotted around the main room for actors to sit in to sign autographs and whatnot, and suddenly you realize just how screwed all of the vendors were at this convention. Most of the vendors were not in the main room that the convention was taking place in. Most of them were tucked off in this tiny little room right over here. Or just a random ass hallway. Because of this, despite the higher than expected crowd, most vendors weren't really getting a lot of sales. Most people would come in, meet the actors, get an autograph, buy from one of the few vendors that was in the main room, and then just kinda hang out in there and talk to the other Trekkies until one of the shows came on. But that's the least of their problems because the convention was horribly mismanaged. Keep in mind just how small of a space they're working with here when I tell you, because at the exact same time Saturday night, the main ballroom had a costume ball where people showed off their cosplays, a panel discussion on the bridge set, an art auction, and a showing of Planet of the Apes. Also, apparently a lot of the volunteers just weren't told to do anything, so they just stood around not doing anything. And the cherry on top of all of this is that somehow, the organizers lost $10,000 on this. And after having such a huge turnout, the only possible explanation I see is that this place was massively over budget. Probably because of that stupid fucking stage. And so, when the dust settled, Lisa Bonnette and the Talos 4 group that she founded to organize this whole event looked at it all, took a deep breath, and said, "Let it ride! New York Star Trek 76, baby!" I cannot stress this enough. The exact same thing happened, except instead of being in Chicago, this one was in New York. And instead of 16,000 people, 50,000 people showed up to the New York Hilton at the Rockefeller Center in New York City. Apparently, a fifth of those people had to be turned away at the door because the hotel literally could not hold that many people. Shoutouts to Hezakia News and Films for this footage of one of the panels. To be fair, they didn't build a giant fuck-off stage that clogged up the whole damn room this time, so presumably, they actually made their money back. Yay! However, what they gained in profitability, they lost in control of the crowd because it was an absolute riot. People were fighting each other. According to one person, there were just people passed out in the halls. And most absurdly, for some reason, someone threw a pie at William Shatner's face. This is something that I can confirm from multiple different accounts from the event. We even know the exact flavor. It was a lemon meringue pie. I love this story because it just raises so many questions. Obviously, why throw the pie, but also, how throw the pie? Where did he get it? I doubt they were serving lemon meringue pie at a convention, so did he have to make it at home or did he buy it at a store? And then on top of that, how did he even get it into the hall in the first place? I know this was the 70s, people were just walking on the planes with guns and all, but like, did he conceal it in a bag or something? Or was he just walking around a convention hall with a pie in his hand? There's just so many different questions that come from this. It's just, the world's beautiful, man. It's just full of unanswered mysteries. After this con, Lisa saw the writing on the walls, threw her hands up, and gave up. Though, the group she founded, Talos 4, did continue to hold Star Trek conventions until the early 80s. But those are far less entertaining to talk about, so we're just gonna move on.
The unwanted people should host a little meet and greet in Anaheim, California on the same days as VidCon.
Pop quiz! Do you know who Tanacon is? Mongu? I'm gonna go with Mongu. Pop quiz. Do you know who Tanacon is? I don't. If you're like me, she's a YouTuber, and a decently large one at that. Though again, I've never heard of her before now. But the fact that as far as I'm concerned, this is a literally who person, it just makes this whole story a whole lot funnier. This whole bonanza started when Tana was not given the featured creator pass at VidCon, a yearly convention held by YouTube. Let's start a convention out of spite that I wasn't given special enough privileges. Good on ya. Yes, she decided to start her own convention, where everyone would get to be a featured creator. Literally the biggest media company in the world with billions of active users. Some random bitch from California. A proper David versus Goliath story here. Except this David did not have the Lord on her side. Organized in part by the ironically named company Good Times, Tanacon opened its doors June 22nd at the Anaheim Marriott Suites in California. According to Tana, 15,000 people showed up. According to the police that had to arrive on the scene for reasons we'll be getting to shortly, approximately 5,000 people showed up. But that's probably for the best, because the Marriott only had capacity for about 1,000 people, meaning 80% of the people who arrived that day were either turned away at the door or had to wait outside. In the middle of summer. In Southern California. In the middle of a goddamn heat wave. A riot was inevitable. By the way, before we go on, I just realized this today. That means that more people arrived at a Star Trek convention in the 70s than to this big, all of these YouTubers coming together convention. And I think that's just really funny, since this is so clearly an ego trip for Miss Tana here. But speaking of those YouTubers, who wouldn't want to risk heat stroke for a chance to meet some of the most famous and beloved YouTubers out there, like
Miranda
Sings,
Toxic gossip train.
or famous cat fucker Shane Dawson. Even the tickets were somehow a disaster. There were 3 different tiers of tickets that you could buy. The featured creator ticket, which was free, which didn't help things. The general entry ticket, which was $45, and I just want to say right off the bat, I don't know what the difference was between those first two other than one being free and one being $45, and the featured fucking creator ticket, which was $65 and came with a pass to skip the line to meet and greet some creators, as well as a gift bag which contained some stickers, a wristband, a picture of the app Oevo, which I've never heard of before but is apparently like TikTok or something. Oh, and a Tanacon marked condom for some reason. Really not helping the weird sex pervert accusations there, all of YouTube. Also, I don't mean to sound like a prude, but looking at any footage of the event, you can clearly see a lot of the people attending were children. So yeah, just hand out a bunch of condoms to kids. No wonder why Miranda Sings showed up. But let's go back to that crowd outside real quick. It's been a few hours. People are hot, sweaty, probably didn't expect to be standing around for this long. So of course, they do what you'd expect. Start rioting. It started small, people yelling for refunds or shoving each other. But eventually escalated into people just barging past security to get inside, or people stealing passes from workers in a desperate attempt to get out of the sun. It got so out of hand that, like I said, police ended up on the scene. And the best part is, that was just day 1. And so, the next day, on June 23rd, a whole bunch of people showed up to nothing. The whole second day was canceled almost immediately. Good Times ended up not having too good of a time as it fell into Chapter 7 bankruptcy. That cat fucker from earlier made a documentary on this whole mess, and as with all major YouTube controversies, none of the content creators suffered any consequences or lost anything from this, and just went back to making content like normal, like nothing ever happened. This one's gonna be a little bit short, but trust me, this is quality over quantity. NFTs! They're a scam! In other shocking news, the sky is normally blue, this shirt is red, and my cat's a bastard. In 2021, a company called Yuga Labs launched the epitome of the non-fungible token, a bunch of randomly generated images of chimps. Poorly drawn, ugly-looking chimps that no one would ever want. But hey, they're one of a kind, and you get to own the code that says you own it. Not the actual image, just the code. The Bored Ape Yacht Club is the true mascot of the NFT scam. Horribly ugly images that no one would actually want, bought by morons who were told that was exclusively their image, not because they actually owned it, but because they owned a line of text that said they owned it. $50,000, please. Everyone knows about these bastards, everyone knows they're all a bunch of morons, everyone's pointed and laughed at them for years. But did you know that they had their own convention? Which predictably went horribly wrong? It was called Apefest and was held in Hong Kong November 3rd to 5th, in 2023. The event had a very noticeable problem, as you can see from the footage here. What little I could find. It was, pretty barren. Mostly just a couple of people hanging out, fucking around with the Hong Kongese, and just being a bunch of losers. But hold your horses there, pal, because if you can believe it, you've been looking at the great big fuck up this entire time. See, for some reason, I guess because the organizers are the types of people who assume more expensive equals better, the organizers lit the event not using normal lights, but with very expensive, very large, very bright, ultraviolet lights. For the unaware, UV lights are not just fancy light bulbs, because they're basically micro suns. They're very bright, and more importantly, very radioactive. These are the same lights that they use in tanning beds, and these were the same lights that surrounded these people throughout the convention. This just went from a bunch of losers who got scammed who are desperately trying to save face to an introduction to a life with cancer. Mere days after the event, people began to complain about irritation in their eyes, and more concerningly, their skin, with some people needing trips to the emergency room. However, jokes aside, as far as I can tell, there haven't been any actual confirmed cases of cancer linked to this event, which is good. Well, but a lot of people did suffer from permanent eye damage. However, it's unclear how much of that came from the UV lights and how much of that came from people actually looking at the art they bought. Could've bought a house with the money you wasted on this shit, you fucking morons!
I want Pinkie Pie and Rainbow Dash.
Which one is
Pinkie Pie and Rainbow Dash.
Already off to a terrible start, you can't put two puns in the name. It's either Las Pegasus Con or Las Vegas Unicon. You can't do both. But I guess what do I expect from a bunch of bronies? Bronies, or for all of the elderly people watching, adults who watch My Little Pony, are kind of a dying breed now, aren't they? They were at their peak in the early 2010s, when My Little Pony Friendship is Magic premiered, and became kind of a phenomenon for a while. The show ended in 2019, and as such, the fandoms died off a bit, but at the time, bronies were truly everywhere. For you younger folks, I cannot express this enough, nowhere was safe. You could not go anywhere without seeing these goddamn ponies. 4chan had to make an entire board just for them because they kept clopping up all of the other board. Ostracized from elsewhere, a very strong culture was formed just around the bronies. They had their own websites, their own content creators. There were brony celebrities. Not celebrities that were bronies who became celebrities. And of course, their own conventions. BronyCon was the biggest one. However, in 2013, only 2 years after the show premiered, mind you, the first big scam con hit the brony fandom hard with our last story tonight. Las Pegasus Unicon, held February 22nd to 24th at the Riviera Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada. This baby was supposed to be huge, with a massive list of stars and writers from the show set to attend, along with a bunch of the aforementioned brony celebrities. Some names include Gary Chalk, Tara Strong, and John DeLance. Fucking Q was there! On paper, this looked like it was going to be the biggest pony convention ever. However, one peek behind the scenes, and you begin to realize things were fucked from the beginning. You see, the Riviera was desperate for business at the time. It was constructed way back in 1955 and hadn't really been renovated to keep up with the times, and by now, it was showing its age. Because of this, the Riviera entered into an interesting deal with the convention organizers, Sandy and Edward Haas. The deal was that instead of paying for the guest rooms and con space up front, like most conventions do, they would pay for it over time as the event went on. Basically, we don't have the money now, we'll pay you as it comes in. Which is a terrible idea you should never agree to, and you're about to see why. The con needed at least 2,000 people in order to make up the money. Unfortunately, only 1,200 people pre-ordered tickets. Don't worry, said the Haases, the rest will surely show up the day of, because the types of people who show up to Las Vegas in the middle of February are totally gonna want to go to a My Little Pony convention. Of the folks who did enter the Riviera on that fateful day, things seemed strange. Firstly, it was pretty empty. Secondly, you couldn't use real money at the convention. It was forbidden, in fact, to use real, actual tender to buy things. Instead, you had to exchange your money for bits. These Monopoly bucks that were literally drawn by hand. I also just want to say, fuck this system. You get a 1-bit note, a 5-bit note, a 10-bit note, and then a 23-bit note. I guess technically there's nothing objectively wrong with that system, but it's obnoxious, so fuck you. But don't worry, vendors who came from across the country just to sell your stuff here. The organizers promised to exchange your bits for real dollars on the last day of the con. This is, of course, if you were actually able to get into the convention in the first place, because for some reason, some people's rooms that they booked with the con just weren't booked anymore. Strange, isn't it? It's almost like they didn't book them at all and just lied and took the money. There was also just a giant fucking wall that was blocking off half the convention for some reason. I don't even know why or how that happened. It's one of those folding walls that you can easily close in like 10 seconds, but it stayed up for the entire first day. But I guess it doesn't really matter when you aren't told where to set up your table, or you can't find any staff to tell you, or when you finally do find some staff, they're busy drawing passes and tickets in crayon or printing off Monopoly dollars. So most people just started setting up their tables wherever the hell they wanted. Some were in the convention hall, some were just in random hallways in the hotel. What I'm trying to get at is the whole thing was a shit show. No one knew what was happening, including the people whose entire job is to know what's happening. Things just kind of spiraled out of control almost immediately, and the next day, things didn't get any better. At one point, Tara Strong, the voice actor for the main character of the show, was given eggplants, which is a food that she's allergic to, and I'm not sure how allergic exactly, but I'm just going to assume deathly, because it's really funny to imagine these people nearly killing the main character of the show. However, to be fair, there were some good things to come from this convention. On the second day, there were 2 fundraisers held to raise money for Kiki's Charity, a charity which seeks to help bring education to children in less fortunate countries. So I guess some good can come from even the darkest of places. By the third day, things went from bad to worse to holy shit. Remember how everyone at the convention who was selling stuff had to use fake money under the promise that they would later be reimbursed for it? Well, the night before, the special guests were informed that their rooms had not been paid for, and their cards were suddenly charged. Which is weird, because normally this is the sort of thing that would be covered by the con. So put yourself in a vendor's position here. You traveled God knows how long to come to this place, in the middle of a desert by the way, just to sell your stuff, got told you have to use Monopoly money, but we promise we'll pay you back, honest, and just learned that the convention wasn't paying for the hotel anymore. Everyone came to the same conclusion. It's time to talk to the organizers. Where are the organizers? I'll tell you where. Not here! Edward and Sandy skipped town the night before without a trace, taking all of the money with them, including the money meant for charity. This screwed over basically everyone. The special guests now had to pay for all of their stuff, the vendors were just not getting any money back, and everyone who was still at the con now had a whole day wiped off the schedule because the Riviera was pissed now and was shutting the whole thing down. For the first few hours of the day, pretty much every special guest just started mass spamming autographs and pictures in a desperate attempt to make up the cash they now had to spend for their room, as well as the trip back home, which was also supposed to be covered by the con. However, the Riviera had enough of this pastel horse bullshit, told everyone that the room was closing in an hour, and everything that wasn't out of the hall would then be hotel property. A mad dash ensued, with basically everyone scrambling to get as much as they could out of the hotel in time. Now, I've been talking a lot about the vendors, obviously, because they're the ones that seem to get screwed over the hardest here, but there were also bands that were brought in, and people with, like, genuinely expensive video equipment, shit that they could not risk losing, that was about to be lost if they didn't book it immediately. Hell, some performers ended up just leaving behind things like backup equipment or backup instruments because they just couldn't get them all out of the room in time. And so at 5 p.m. on Sunday, the convention doors were shut and everyone was left having to find out some way to get home. But of course that's not the end of the story. These people had to get sued, right? You can't just skip town with a bunch of money, not pay the people you're supposed to pay and just not face any consequences. Right? Well, believe it or not, apparently you can. Maybe I missed something, but as far as I can tell, Sandy and Edward Haas suffered no consequences from this whatsoever, outside of obviously not being able to make another convention again. There was obviously still a fallout though. Basically, all of the talent present at the time agreed that the con fucked over every other Brony convention in some way. Remember, this was 2013, very early on in the lifespan of this series. This was one of the first big cons, and it was this big of a disaster. From this moment on, basically everyone involved in the show would be very apprehensive of the idea of going to a convention, especially a first-year convention, because what if it's another Unicon? The Riviera also didn't see a happy ending here, with it being demolished in 2015. All this just leaves us with one question though. Was the con a scam from the start, or was it started with good intentions and just became a scam due to ungodly levels of incompetence? I don't know. I'm kinda half and half. On one hand, the whole pay-as-you-go thing they schedule at the hotel is incredibly sketchy. On the other, why even go through all of the effort of actually getting the real talent from the show to show up if you're just gonna try and scam people? Regardless of any of that though, the fact that, as far as I'm aware, Kiki's charity never got the money that was raised for it, tells me that whether or not they intended to scam people, the Haas's are still pieces of shit. So fuck them. And there you have it. Some of the most disastrous convention stories out there. From scams to potential cancer to, worst of all, pie assault. I think we all learned something today. Massive disasters are absolutely hilarious. But on a more sincere note, I think that even if these weren't successful in their main goal of making money, they still kind of succeeded in what a convention is really about. Sure, they're the selling point, but the main point of a convention isn't the celebrities that appear or the merch you buy. It's about going out and meeting people, strangers who share the same interest as you. It's about going out with friends or making new ones and forming memories that last a lifetime. And while I'm sure the experience wasn't pleasant for a lot of people at the time, now we can look back and laugh at just how much of a mess these all were. Well, unless you got cancer from the Bored Ape thing, that's not funny. Well, kinda is. And while these cons were a failure, you can bet your bottom dollar that if I hear there's a first-time convention that's overpromising coming somewhere near me, I'm going. Because I would kill to get to see one of these disaster cons firsthand. I'm Sir Strongman, and that was the thing.